Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much again for joining. My name is Mike Imhenna. I'm the Executive Director of afikra. I'm honored to welcome our special guest, Wissam Shawkat, who spent his teen summers lettering for a local science shop before he began studying for a degree in civil engineering at Basra University, graduating in 1996. Now Wissam is one of the top calligraphic writers and designers in the world. His writing is so remarkable that it has become highly recognized for its unique aesthetic qualities. Wissam, thank you so much for joining afikra Conversations.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Let's. Sorry?
I'm saying just good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Wissam, let's start going back to those teen summers in Iraq.
Yeah.
When did you first become interested in calligraphy, and how you can tell us a little bit about how early on in your life were you exposed to the various styles, calligraphic styles?
So that was in the 80s. I remember in the year 1984, one day in the art class, I was in the 4th grade in the primary school. Our teacher decided, he said, today we're going to talk about calligraphy. And he held the chalk on the side and wrote some ruqa letters on the blackboard. For me as a kid, I was like really fascinated with how simple letters can take a beautiful graphic forms. And I consider that was the moment, like for me, that opened my eyes to calligraphy. At the same time, my father bought my brother a calligraphy book for Hashim al-Khattat, which has the different styles. And yeah, my brother was not really interested in after a while, he gave me that book. And during those years, it was very troubled time. So the school used to be off for a while during because that was the Iraq-Iran war. So we spent a lot of time in the shelters, like underground shelters. So I remember as a kid, I had nothing to do. So I remember I had my book with me and some calligraphy pens and inks. And I used to practice calligraphy a lot. For me, it was a kind of, like escape from what was happening around me. So these are my early memories of how I started with calligraphy.
Yeah. Were you drawn? Calligraphy as an art form is always interesting to me because it's irreversibly, irreversibly, I guess, tied to the written form and itself. Were you drawn to specific text, the ideas behind the words that were written, or was it just you didn't really care about the words themselves?
Yeah, exactly. In the beginning, no. I was just I was doing calligraphy, whatever it's like, any style, because I didn't know at that time. I was just copying from the book, but gradually I started to learn. At that time, there was no much like resources. I remember that I only had that book, and after a while, I bought like another book that talk about some, like biographies of some calligraphers. So, but yeah, I think I was mainly attracted to the graphic qualities of the letters, not the text or the writing itself.
Yeah, so that's your sort of teenage years. You decide to go become a civil engineer. While you're studying, are you also sort of training yourself alone? In interviews, I've heard you say that you didn't study under anyone. You weren't an apprentice, which is the typical path, right? The typical path for somebody who becomes a calligrapher, Arabic calligrapher, is they study under the hand of one of the masters. Yeah. So how are you teaching yourself?
So actually, it took a long time, definitely, but the traditional path usually is to find a mentor or a master, and you study under him. Like you go to him, he correct for you, and you continue. This is still happening. Like if we go to Turkey in Istanbul mainly, or if we go to Iran, we will see this is still happening. But in my case, because of the situation, the chaos, the war, there was not many like masters in my city, so I couldn't have that. But At the same time, when I used to travel, let's say to Baghdad, I used to visit some calligraphers, which is mainly most of them, they are sign painters. But for me, like someone who is older than me that I could show him, and critique my work. For me, that was the way I was teaching myself and to know if I was good or bad. So, but I continued practicing by looking at every calligraphy my hand can get, and also by working in sign shops during the holidays. I mean, I continued that from the 80s till I would say the 90s when I was in high school. So it's a way
Yeah,
for me to practice calligraphy as well.
okay, so for the people on the call who don't know what a sign shop is, what is a sign shop?
Uh, I mean, and I'm talking about Iraq, which is, I think it's the case.
No, it's interesting.
It's the case with most of the Arab world back in the days. So sign shop is the person who was like a designer. I mean, if you want a logo at that time, you go to like a sign painter who will design a logo for you. And before the computer, everything was done by hand. So yeah, we used to do all sorts of writings on glass, on marble, on. Like I remember during the 80s when I was working, I did so many headstones for the martyrs of the war during the Iraq-Iran war.
Wow.
So was something we used to do a lot. And or we write, the announcement of the martyr when they bring him to his family, because back in the days in Iraq, people put like a black cloth on their house from the outside to announce that they have a son who was killed in certain in a certain battle in the war. So I did that as a kid. I used to write most of these things. So yeah.
Are there, like, online now, if somebody wants to learn how to, if a teenager in Saida wants to learn how to draw manga, they're online and they're just watching, reading, manga sites on YouTube. Yeah. What books were you even looking at? I mean, what were you, is there a seminal book that you had in mind where you just were flipping through it a million times? Is there one book or one master that you thought of?
So the first book was Hashim al-Khattat, which I still have that book, by the way. It's from the 80s. Hashim al-Khattat is the most, I would say, prominent Iraqi calligraphers back in the days. He died in 1973, but he left that book, which most of the Arab calligraphers, I would say, learned from it. He said he wrote the rules of most of the styles. And I was looking at that, definitely. And again, I remember I bought another book that talks about the biographies of some Iranian and Turkish calligraphers. And I used to do a lot of photocopying at that time. Everything I find has a nice calligraphy. I used to take it, like borrow some books from friends and photocopy them, and created, like, I remember a file that has many calligraphy examples. So there was nothing, actually, there was not much to look at. I mean, especially at that time, I mean, really, there was nothing.
Yeah. So I want to fast forward because I can talk to you about that phase of your life for a long time. If you were to just give us a little bit of a class right now in one or two sentences, what are the main calligraphic styles, the traditional calligraphic styles, and how is Al-Wissam, what has now become called Al-Wissam, different from that?
Okay, so the main calligraphic styles, if I want to start from like the older ones, is the Kufi style, which is also, we can categorize it into many styles. So we have the early Kufic, we have the Eastern Kufic, then we have the Maghribi Kufic, and we have the Square Kufic, and we have the Fatimid Kufic. So these are the main Kufic styles. And there is some like similar branches come from these. Then we have the more, I would say, the more flexible or handwritten styles, or the cursive, some people like to call them, which is we have al-Nasakh, and we have Thuluth, we have al-Muhaqqiq, and we have the Tawqi' or Ijaza. Then we have the latest, then we have the Nasta'liq or Farsi, which is mainly like practiced in Iran. Then we have the latest styles, which were invented by the Ottomans, which they are Ruq'a and Diwani and Jali Diwani. So these are the main classic styles. So if I want to compare them to Al-Wissam, so I just want to come back how this has started. I mean, so in 2004, I was working in a design agency, and I was one day designing a logo, and in the brief, the client wanted something modern. I mean, he said, I don't want you to use like any classic script like Diwani or Thuluth, because this is what is mostly used, or Kufi. That was mostly used in logos at that time. So for me as a calligrapher, and that like triggered something, like how can I come up, I had to create something from scratch. So I started to experiment. I mean, of course, whatever I was doing was influenced from the styles of calligraphy I know, like my knowledge of calligraphy.
Yeah.
So anyway, that logo didn't happen. I mean, the whole project changed, but I created one word and I really liked the result. And I decided, like, what if I can continue? Can I create something more with the same style? So this is actually, I started to test this by many, like freelance projects I used to get. So I started to notice people really like that style. This is something fresh. And for me also to get away from using traditional scripts, or sometimes, to my respect to, I would say, to traditional scripts, I don't want to ruin them when it comes to logo. You have sometimes to extend some strokes, or, So I think that, that the calligrapher in me led to create that style, which at that time it was not called Al-Wissam. It was just something I was playing around with. But after almost 7 years in using it, it became, I did so many like projects and logos, and apparently there was a style happening.
Yeah.
And
so two questions
Yeah.
for you. One is, did traditional calligraphers, so first of all, the people who are looking at the screen, there are two images here. Which one is Al-Wissam, which one is not?
That's not for me, right?
No, that's for you. That's
for me, okay.
Yeah. Before I ask the question, just tell people which one is Al-Wissam, which one isn't.
Yeah, so we have now an answer from Mike saying it's on the right, which is correct. Yeah.
Great.
So the image on the right, it's Al-Wissam style, and the one on the left, it's Jelly Diwani, which is a very classic style.
So if a traditional calligrapher, sorry to cut you off, but just if a traditional calligrapher saw Al-Wissam when it first was emerging, what would their response be?
I mean, honestly, see, in the beginning, when I was using it as a design, it was okay. But once in 2010, I started using it in art pieces. That's when I exhibit them for the first time with a group of like very like well-known calligraphers from Iran and Turkey and the Arab world. Some of them, they really loved it. Some of them, they criticized it a lot. They said, like, you cannot come up with something new. And this is actually, for me, why we cannot come up with something new. I mean, the whole calligraphy like was found based on people creating something new for the things before them. So why this was stopped? And I'm totally against that. So I didn't honestly care to what people were saying. So I continued using it. And again, at that time it was really even not called Al-Wissam. So the name came from, I think, after I launched my Instagram and social media, people start to call it Wissam style, Wissam, and this is how the name came.
So I'm sure there will be more questions about this, but I want to move on because there's more stuff. That's not the only innovation that you've sort of reimagined. This display here, we were talking before the call, and you were saying that this is sort of the new classic.
Yeah.
Why is that term relevant? Why is that term appropriate?
So here, for people who know calligraphy, I mean, especially Thuluth, so all the pieces you see here is Thuluth, except the Basmala, which is Al-Muhaqqaq, which is kind of, we are writing it now in Thuluth letters with certain extension in some of the letters. So on the piece on the right, that piece specifically, that heart shape, the connection, it's not there in the rules of calligraphy. So this is something I created. So it's something new, but while maintaining the same rules of thuluth calligraphy. The other two pieces, the way the whole piece, and by the way, I want to just to clarify something. So what you are looking at here, these are original artworks written by hand. So this is nothing digital here. So these are original pieces written by like ink and acrylics on a handmade paper. So the way the piece, not written in horizontal lines, it has that kind of, I would say, a typographic composition. This was, before that, there was nothing done like that. I mean, calligraphy, especially in thuluth, was written very classic, very normal composition, either a rectangle or a teardrop or a circle.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that kind of like opened the way to more, like I would say, modern look of a classic calligraphy. And that's why I call them the new classics.
So as we continue to look through some of this stuff, I'm curious, are there rules around color and text that you are also that you're also sort of innovating around?
I don't think. See, when it comes, of course, I mean, the main color was used. It's either black or brown,
Mm-hmm.
but color was used during the history in manuscript. So I wouldn't say. But if you notice, I love to use red and black a lot, and this is kind of became connected to me. So I mean, these pieces you are looking at, they are from a show I did in 2011 New York. And those are three pieces now, they are from that show. So that color was, because it was titled Letters of Love.
Yeah.
So most of the pieces I created, they have like red and black.
But even, I guess, in layman's terms, even like it seems like you play around with filling in these negative spaces with solid colors.
Yes, yeah.
And that is also, I mean, that would not be common, right?
Yeah, that's not common for classic calligraphy, definitely. But I wouldn't say, I mean, filling things, for me, it's more of to emphasize on certain graphic elements within the letter. So that actually filling will lead later to what you're going to show for the calligraphons. Yeah.
Okay, so I was reading this article that was about you, and it said that some of the, you were influenced by these names that I don't know because I'm not in the space: Sami Effendi, Muhammad Nazif, Halim Effendi, Hamid
Hamadi.
Hamadi. Yeah. So these are presumably these like giants of calligraphy, right?
Yes.
Who
So
are some of your
Turkish masters? Yeah.
Who are some of your influences, not only from the Arab world and the Islamic world, but also from the Western world and sort of the Western tradition?
I mean, honestly, from the Western, many. I mean, I would say Pete Mondrian. Yeah. There is some artists people might not know them, like Cecil Toshan. He's a collage artist. I love the work of, the Cubism of Picasso and George Braque. This is for me also like a big influence in my most recent work. To be honest, so many artists, but like the names you mentioned before, these are, I just want to clarify something. Yeah, these are traditional calligraphers from the Ottoman era, like Turkish masters, who are the people considered that, like I would say finalized or set the aesthetic values for calligraphy styles, like mainly thuluth.
Were all of these masters also producing art in the same way that you're producing art pieces, or no?
No, the names you mentioned, they were traditionalists. I mean, most of their work is only traditional. I mean, you don't see, because most of them, again, they went through the same way, like from a master to teacher, and another guy became like a student of one of the masters. So art, calligraphy art at that time was like to produce, a classic piece and to be hung on the wall. That was considered for them as art.
If I showed you a piece, would you be able to say without knowing, oh, that's Effendi? I can tell.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, most of the time. If it's a good piece, if it's from the pieces that we know in the tradition of calligraphy, yeah.
what would be some of the things that would tip you off? Like what are the things that you would look for and say, oh, that's very clearly this person?
I mean, first of all, we look at the era. So even with the smallest tiny details, which normal people won't tell,
Yeah.
we can tell. I mean, this is because this is how we study the evolution of calligraphy. Like this is how we look at aesthetics. Otherwise, if you cannot, if you don't have the sensitivity to look at those aesthetics, you wouldn't, appreciate what you are doing. So definitely, I mean, I would look on certain tashkils or the way certain letter written, even if there is a no signature, most of the time we can tell.
So cool. Okay, I want to talk about abstraction, some of your work around abstraction. You talked about some of the influences from the Western traditions. I was amazed by your work, the abstraction stuff. When did you first start thinking about that process? When did you start working on this stuff?
So this abstraction thing, I mean, I would say I started to sit and sketch on paper in 2014. But I mean, definitely for me, it came like gradually from, I remember in 2011 when I visited New York for the first time for my show, I stayed for 23 days there. And I went to MoMA twice, and I used to visit so many art galleries. And I was really like influenced by how the Western art world was moving forward and all the history of art. While in calligraphy, nothing changed much. So I start to experiment, and I start to ask like for us, like all these, I call them the calligraphon pieces. They come from a very simple thing as calligraphers we do. We spend all these years of practice and to write the letter perfectly in the shape. Let's say if we are using a black ink. So we really spend a lot of time writing the letter, perfecting the black parts. But in reality, the way we can tell this is a good calligraphy or bad calligraphy is by looking at the spaces between the letters or within them. So this for me is how we should celebrate those beautiful qualities. And I started to take thuluth letters. So by the way, everything you see now on the screen, these are thuluth letters. So the most traditional calligraphy style. But I start to fill the spaces, taking the spaces out, and also to eliminate the calligraphic quality, like the piece on top, which is written love, by the way. So this is the word hub, and the piece repeated a couple of times. And I start to like, what's happening, like the abstract forms happening, the shapes, the movement. And from that, I started, the whole thing started. So I sketched so many like pieces, and some of the pieces, there is nothing written. I mean, most of them, there is nothing written. If there is something, you will see the word love, hub, or mahabba written most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, it's interesting because like that concept of focusing on the negative space and how that is actually the art form, right? I love what you just said. It's a fantastic calligrapher is somebody who knows, who expertly doesn't write where they're not supposed to, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. What has been the response? I'm curious what has been the response globally.
The response was great, but again, in my first show, which I called it Monumental 1111 in 2015, I remember there was a visit from a group of calligraphers from Turkey, which happened that most of them, they are my friends actually, and we have a mutual respect. One of them is very old guy. He's like 80 plus, and he's like Sheikh, and I wouldn't say his name, but he's like a big name in calligraphy in Istanbul. And there was younger generation. There was also like a well-known calligrapher, which is more, I would say, open-minded and modern. So when they enter the exhibition and they are attending an exhibition by me, they thought they will see like a calligraphy, while they saw this kind of work. And that old guy, he was like very angry and he was shocked, I would say.
Yeah.
But again, this is his way of looking at calligraphy, and I don't blame him. But But for me, like other people from outside the calligraphy world, I would say from the design world or the art world, they loved it. And especially the Westerners, I noticed they really like that, because my idea in these works mainly is most of people in calligraphy exhibition, they will ask, what is written? What is the text? For me, I just want to get away from that, because my love for calligraphy was not about the text. My love
Yeah.
is to celebrate the beautiful forms of the letters. And this is exactly what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I always find it, in particular, you know, like calligraphy, traditional calligraphy is trying to conceal communicating the message, right? Like you
Yeah,
have to really
yeah,
look at it, try to figure it out.
yeah,
And also you're also kind of doing that, right? You're abstracting it, you're boiling it down and reducing it to these spaces. Um, are there any other influences that somebody like me would be surprised by? Are you influenced by a specific by you know, music or by other things that are trickling into this process?
No, I would be frank. I would say no. I mean,
Yeah.
mainly it's a visual influence. I would say it's an influence by Western schools like Cubism, collage. You know, the letter itself for me is like, but sometimes I borrow from the Western schools of art, like the final, I would say, visual effect. But everything you see is based on letters, like the piece on the upper left corner, which is, I call it Love Symphony. So what is written here is the word love, by the way, written I think 15 times in different ways using thuluth, but I would say the abstracted thuluth letters. So everything is, so no calligraphic quality here. So you see everything is monolinear. So
Mm-hmm.
again, for me, this has added a nice effect to the calligraphy, but still the forms, they are there. So we still appreciate those forms.
Do you is this all done by hand or is any of this done digitally?
No, no. I mean, some of the pieces for me, while I sketch them to clean them and create the final design, or to check the colors. Of course, I mean, I scan my sketches,
Mm-hmm.
color them, test them. But everything you see here, I mean, the two pieces on the left hand, they are screen prints, but from my hand drawing. But the pieces in the middle, these are actually hand pieces, so they are originals.
So let me ask you a question. Are you anyone's mentor? Are you anyone's master? Have you decided to start a new school um, of young teaching young artists?
I mean, I teach I have some friends who always come to me, correct for
Sure.
them, I would say classic calligraphy, and ask me about if they produce a piece of art. But I don't have someone in, you know, like mentoring him, I would say every day or once a week. I have many, I mean, you know, many beginners, I would say. Because I taught many workshops. So of course, I mean, I have people ask me all the time.
Great.
Yeah.
Um, so the last question before we begin to transition, what are you working on now? Do you still feel like there's meat on the bone here? Like are you still kind of focused on abstraction or is your mind wandering to something else?
Actually, I'm still working on abstraction, but I'm also working on something within the new classic. So I'm working on new pieces, which actually on my Instagram I publish some of the work, which is mainly Ruqa style, which is the most simple uh, hand calligraphy, which was mainly like, you know, invented in the Ottoman era again for the normal handwriting. But
Mm.
that style stayed till now as a very simple calligraphy style. Most of the beginners of calligraphy, they learn it. And I want to bring it more into art. So I'm working on something within that. I'm working on something also within Thuluth style, but within the new classic. So I have a show within, hopefully within 2 months. So I will be exhibiting some of those new works.
Amazing. Okay, we're gonna move into the quick Q&A because I think there are going to be a lot of questions in the chat. So for our first question, what are you reading or watching right now?
Reading, actually, I'm reading a book. Most of my readings, by the way, it's about art or design or calligraphy.
Sure.
But I'm reading a book by Khat Foundation about the Syrian designer and artist Abdul Qadir Arnaout, which is actually someone we don't know much about. It's a beautiful book, just I think published 3 years ago by Khat Books, which I could show it to you, which is this book.
Great.
So I'm reading this book now. Interesting. He's considered the pioneer of modern design in Syria, and very interesting stuff. Really, I'm enjoying the book.
Fantastic.
Watching, it's funny. I'm I'm watching Friends for the third time on Netflix.
Do you start at season 1 or you start?
Yeah, I started season 1, but this is probably my third time watching it. But I just can't.
Oh, wow.
Because I haven't watching it in order since a very long time, so I'm discovering new stuff.
Wow. Okay, I'll be there for you. Okay, who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
That would be. It might sound cliche, but that would be Picasso in the past, because for me, Picasso represent, first of all, I used to be like, when I was younger, I used to say, why people love Picasso? His work's really horrible. I mean, why he's so famous? But when I started to travel, and I visited 2 of Picasso museums, the one in Paris and in Barcelona, and I attended many shows, I start to understand how this guy was genius. I mean, he is ahead of his time. He invented so many modern art movements that would, influence the 20th century art.
I think he's ahead of our time.
Exactly. So, I mean, I just want to know what's in his head, how he thinks. So definitely he would be the person.
Cool. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
I think that would be replaced. What do most traditional calligraphers most understand? I mean, I have people who understand my work, but misunderstand. Some people, they just can't get modern art, or they think, calligraphy is something stopped within the tradition, and it's something sacred. We shouldn't touch it, and which I'm totally against that. But I get it sometimes, because in a long period of time, which is even till now, calligraphy was connected to religion. So I think that's created that thing around calligraphy, where people, once you start, I mean, I got so many hate messages on social media when I post something that has a Quranic verse while I was playing with calligraphy. So
yeah,
some of you could still see them. I mean, people, So yeah, but I just don't care. I just don't care.
That's good. That's a good quality. Okay, whose work do you admire or are inspired by? I guess aside from Picasso.
I mean, so many. I mean, artists I mentioned before. I mean, really, there are many in modern art and calligraphy.
Any non-artists?
Non-artists. I mean, I would say I love like architects. I love architecture in general. I mean, Le Corbusier, I love his work. The furniture design, Eames, I love his work. Zaha Hadid, I love her work. These are,
before I open it up, do you think your work is influenced at all by having studied engineering, or is that part of your brain that does not enter into the way you work?
I mean, for a long time, I thought, I wasted 4 years of my life studying engineering, then another 2 years in army service. But I think engineering gave me, because my work is very, very clean and precise. I really plan my work very well. And that take me back to the years when I was studying engineering. I used to take full marks in engineering drawing because everything was done by hand. I think this is kind of influence. That's probably the only thing I enjoyed during my studies in civil engineering. So I would say that part only, you know, like the craftsmanship of my work, that comes from engineering.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we're going to go into questions. Rawan, I'm asking you to unmute so you can ask your question.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I can do it the last, just because I'm on a business call too? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
I appreciate your commitment.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, we'll go on to Muhammad.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah.
Love the session, really cool. I had a question. When you're calligraphing, and I'm saying it that way because I'm not sure, do you paint or do you use pens that have a different brush or tip that lets you use narrow and thick?
Like no, I don't paint. I use a calligraphy pen. Depend on what I'm doing, but it's I would say it's a chiseled nib pen. Either it's a bamboo or a wooden pen or a metal pen. But yeah, it's a special calligraphy pen, which is kind of similar to Latin calligraphy. The only difference is the cut. I don't paint. I mean, there is many calligraphers who use a brush to paint calligraphy on a canvas, or they use spray on the wall. I don't do that. I mean, I mainly do, I use calligraphic pen.
Great, thanks, Muhammad. Hannah?
Hello. So I have a question. By the way, I love the session. Thank you for
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This. My question is for someone who wants to learn calligraphy. What kind of first steps do you advise to start? Should I just try to copy some pictures that I see, or what kind of steps do you advise?
Yeah. Okay. So for anyone who on a beginning now, I mean, you have tons of resources compared to what we had back then. So, but you need to know which one is good and which one is bad, because the social media or internet is filled with the rubbish actually. So I think if you have the passion for it, if you have the patience to do calligraphy, is to start with, I would say, ruqa or diwani, or the style that you feel close to you, the one that you like most. But first of all, you need to educate yourself about the tools, the history. I think you need to educate yourself in calligraphy in general, get to know who are like the main masters of calligraphy, the Arabs, the Iranians, the Turks. Then this is how it's a journey. It's not something you decide one day, okay, I'm gonna become a calligrapher. No, I think it's something, and it will take years, by the way. I mean, it's not something, some people ask, can I become a calligrapher or learn this style in 2 or 3 years? It's not like that. It's if you don't have the passion for it, you won't go anywhere.
Okay, great, Hannah, thanks. Rita?
Hello, Wissam.
Hi, Rita. Hi.
I would like to say first, I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you so much.
I've been writing some Wissam for a while now, so I would like to know what would be your advice for me so I can get better.
I think I need to see your writing. So if you follow me on Instagram, maybe send me some examples, just to remind me that was you, so I could have a look on. Yeah, because that's what many people
thank
do.
You.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks, Rita. I think it's Silke. I think I'm saying that right.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much. I wanted to know if you think, Wissam, and thank you first for sharing your thoughts and views. If you think there is a difference between being left hand or being right hand in making calligraphy. Obviously, I'm left hand. Obviously, I struggle, so I need an excuse. Thank you for your view.
Okay, no, there's no excuse. Yeah, there is a difference in the way we cut the pen, but also depend on how the person hold the pen, because I've seen left-hand people, you know, hold the pen the other way around. The thing is, the benefit of being a left-handed is you could see parts of the letters while we as right-handed, we don't see. And also to make a big stroke from right to left, we kind of, you know, push the pen. Actually, sorry, we pull the pen, while in left hand, you push it away. So the movement of the hand is much easier in the left hand. Of course, I cannot make it, but for you as a left-handed. So there is a difference, but like in terms of the pen cut, it needs to be more slanted and sometimes cut the, you know, and like on the other way. So I can't explain it now. I mean, that's only most of the time when I give a workshop, I ask them the first, like, who is left-handed, because I want them to see how they hold the pen, then I can decide how to cut the pen for them. I'm talking about the bamboo pen or the reed pen.
Okay, that's bad news. You're supposed to be even better than you are.
Yeah, just a quick, if I want to just things from here. So yeah, I don't know if this is clear.
Yeah, that is clear. That's great.
So this is a reed pen, a bamboo. So you see this angle here in the left-hand part. It's for left-hand. It's more slanted, so the angle is more. You know, that's the main difference.
Yeah, that's great. That's very, very helpful.
Okay.
Great question. Balsam?
Yes, thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you, Wissam. And thank you so much for such an informative session. A few of us in New Zealand want to know that hopefully once COVID-19 disappears and travel bans are lifted, would you consider coming to New Zealand to run a series of workshops?
Probably. Okay. So because my mother and two brothers lives in Sydney in Australia, so the closest to New Zealand, if I was supposed to come is last year. I would be in Australia and Sydney probably. I don't know if New Zealand on my list, but why not? I think it's quite close. Maybe you.
Only 3 hours away.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Given current levels of COVID in New Zealand, I'd be willing to come. So feel free to invite me. I'll go. Sounds like the right place to go right now. Next up is Mace, who is an ambassador for afikra and is the reason why this session is going. So huge thanks to Mace, who's our Iraq ambassador. So Mace, here's your question.
Thank you, Wissam and Mikey. This was very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, would you be interested in creating some virtual courses for people who would want to, go through the steps of how to, create an art piece that is based on the calligraphy letters? Because as you said, like, I see what you do as art. It's not just the whole word. It's appreciating the process of the letters. Yeah. And since we're like in a pandemic, would you consider giving virtual courses?
You mean you're talking about the calligraph forms, right? My latest work, the abstract?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely I could give a talk, because actually I did that in 2019. I was invited by Chicago Calligraphy Collective, a group of calligraphers in Chicago. Mainly I was invited by like a great calligrapher. Her name is Karen Ness. And she invited me to give a 3-day workshop about that subject. So I gave them a talk, then we created, each one created an art piece within the course. Then we moved the same workshop to New York within the same, when I was there. So definitely that's possible, but I mean, for them there, they applied my thinking, they applied the way I was dealing with letters. Some of them, they applied it with Latin letters, and we had some really nice results. So definitely, I mean, for me, this calligraph forms, it's not a style of calligraphy that I would teach. It's more than, rather than, it's just a way of thinking with calligraphy, a way of thinking of how how I look at calligraphy. I mean, mainly it's to do with me. The way I fall in love with calligraphy is by looking at the graphical, shapes of letters. And this is how I translated everything. So yeah, I mean, it's possible to do, I would say, to do a talk, a lecture, to show my thinking, show some sketches, the process. Of course, yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mace. And again, thanks for organizing and making this happen. Samar, you're up next.
Hi, Wissam. Thank you so much for this talk. Lovely work. Always been a fan.
Thank you.
My question is about the iPad Pro brush that you've created with Apple. Is that downloadable, or can we access this if we have Procreate or not?
No, actually, yes, I did that a couple of years ago in collaboration with Apple and my friend Majid. But no, the whole project, we stopped it. Actually, I never touched it since years because I'm just going to say that I'm a person who's against using this kind of work with calligraphy. Okay. And I just didn't want to open the doors because many people ask me, and I already see a lot of horrible work done by people claiming they are doing calligraphy and using, the brushes in Procreate and Illustrator. So unfortunately, it's not downloadable. It's something very, it's really not complicated to do it. It's just, we added the effect of the ink and we find a way of the tilting. But again, it's really not very smooth, not easy. I need to clarify something for you. In calligraphy, why you see when we write the letters are beautiful, it's because we tilt our hand, we change the angle of our hand every time, probably 4 or 5 times within the letter. And that's what Procreate cannot achieve. No one ever, yeah. So that's the problem.
I thought the pencil was more sensitive. It is as sensitive as the actual kind of hand movement.
Exactly.
But if you tell me no, I believe you, not Apple, but hey.
Yeah, it's not, we find a way on Procreate to have that tilting, but that tilting was not controllable, really. It was very, I would say, random. So okay. Yeah, I gave up. It's not something I really like, but I did it because Apple want me to demonstrate calligraphy on the iPad, and we did it. We succeeded, but yeah, it's not something I advise. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Don't worry. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wissam, as we wait for one last question, I have a question for you. Would you describe calligraphy as being a very physically draining exercise? Like you're describing it almost like as if you have to, there's like a dance being performed.
It's not physical. Of course, with calligraphy comes a back pain, a neck pain, all these sort of things, especially when you grow older. But it's more of you really need to have patience to do calligraphy and to reach to a level. I've been doing calligraphy now almost like 36 years. But there was time I used to practice for like 4 or 5 hours per day, sitting and writing calligraphy. And this is how we evolve. This is how we master how to write the letters. If you cannot do that, you won't reach anywhere.
Yeah, so, it's like you're describing like being a violinist or something. It's not. It's
yeah, like it's the same. Practicing calligraphy is like practicing music. Definitely, it's the same thing. If you just don't practice, your level will go down. Yeah.
Especially we have a question from Rawan, and then I'll ask you one final question.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you. By the way, this has been one of the most interesting afikras that I've joined. And thank you guys for your time in putting this together. My question is, what type of ink have you experienced with? And do you have a preference? I know that, a lot of people do use like Arabic gum and make, to thicken the ink. Do you have experience with that?
Okay, so the ink I use, first of all, I use black and color. So for the black, I still use we call it Arabic ink, which is handmade, which is similar, I would say, to the Chinese or Japanese ink. It's made from the soot the black suit اللي احنا نسميه بالعراقي السخام نفسه.
Yeah.
ينخلط مع الصمغ العربي. It's mixed with Arabic, like you know, and they add certain but so what I'm doing is actually I mix Arabic ink I buy from Istanbul mainly. I mix it with some Japanese ink, a good quality Japanese ink, because they are the same formulas. Most of the black inks, by the way, they are made from soot. And I add a little bit of like a black acrylic ink called Schminke. It's a German brand, very good quality. And that's for the black. For the colors, I use mainly some like pigment inks, like not certain brand, just like a nice pigment inks. And also sometimes I mix them with Schminke, or I mix them with Daler-Rowney Kali brand. So these are mainly the inks I use.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rawan. Okay, my final question, Wissam, is going to be a very selfish question on behalf of afikra. The question is, who do you nominate for us to interview next? Not next as in this upcoming week, but in the upcoming months.
As a calligrapher or in general?
As somebody who you say, oh my God, that would be really, really interesting if you interview this person.
I will nominate actually my friend Majid Al-Yusuf, who's also a calligrapher and designer, and we are very close friends. And you will see, like for calligraphomes, this is something we did together. So he has his own calligraphomes, approach. We exhibited together. We are very close, and I will nominate him definitely because he would have a good input and insights about calligraphy as well.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this, Wissam. I really, really appreciate it. I learned an enormous amount. You have beautiful work, and it's really, really fun talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who joined the call. Please, I posted 2 links into the chat. The first is a single question feedback form, letting us know if this was good or not. The second is a way to support afikra by going to our Patreon link. Allow us to keep doing what we're doing. And if you're interested in following up on conversations you may have missed, subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast. This recording will go up to both those things. So please do that, like and subscribe and all that good stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody.
And, you could also, if you have any questions, you could always send me on my Instagram. Yeah. Hopefully I could answer you.
Let me go back to post your Instagram. And yeah, that's Wissam's Instagram. So hope you enjoyed this and enjoy your days or your nights wherever you are.